Hi, I'm John F. Allen. And I'm R.J. Sullivan. And we're the Two Towers.
As far as Mike, it says Micon, I guess, the daughter
Mm-hmm.
of Tien Lu.
Mm-hmm.
As far as she goes, there's a untold story here because Tien Lu went from being a prostitute to the Americans, soldiers, to apparently doing very, very well for herself. I got the idea the daughter was not wanting for anything as far as her upbringing goes. They lived in a very good house. She seemed very pampered, I guess. Old enough to where this revelation that she had a father that she didn't know. I mean, I thought it was kind of weird how there was this hesitation to tell her. And I remember I was thinking at the time, it's not like she's looking for a dad at this point, you know? Oh, she seems like she's pretty much an adult and on her own. And what difference does it make at this point? It's not like he knew that he had a daughter. He clearly didn't. I love that scene, by the way. But, that was one of my favorite moments in the movie was when he's introduced to his daughter, and it's pretty obvious because she has darker skin, and you can tell that Otis wants to ask the question, and I think that went on like there's this like 35-second pause, it felt like, where you can kind of see his brain kind of churning, trying to think of how to ask the question he wants to ask. That was
Right.
that was a great moment. But ultimately, I thought it was weird that she waited until afterwards to finally introduce them, because I'm like, she's an adult woman now. There's no shame, or there's going to be no expectations of what you're not going to get child support for a grown woman. So I mean, it's like, hey, here's your father, you guys should probably get to know each other. Seemed like more was made out of that than needed to be. But I like to talk about other favorite moments in this movie. So John, I'll let you start on that. What were some highlights for you?
Well, I have to concur with you that moment in and of itself was, I liked Otis's character overall. I think of the vets, his character was one that I really liked the most. And I say that I liked the most because of who he was, his character, his standards as a person.
Yeah, great integrity, for sure.
Right, exactly. As far as the others were concerned, the standout character to me obviously was Paul, played by Delroy Lindo, in the sense that he gave a very compelling performance with regards to the character. And I think that one of the touching moments in the film was when the son, played by Jonathan Majors, stepped on a landmine. And, Paul's Delroy Lindo's character, Paul, was like, I'm going to save my son. This is my blood. Now, they had a very antagonistic relationship from the start of the film. There was issues. Now, David, the son, Paul's son, he had went on to college. He went to Morehouse. He got a degree in social work. He was working with kids. I think he was in a high school, and he made something of himself. However, his relationship with his father was strained because Paul was suffering post-traumatic stress disorder, which had affected their relationship. But there was another layer of that too. And I'm jumping from two scenes from the time that David stepped on the landmine and Paul was in vested in saving his son's life. And then when he got off of the landmine, they hugged. That father and son moments really touch me on a personal level for a lot of reasons, and we won't get into that here. But all of that being said, that was a touching scene and a touching moment in the film for me, one that stood out. And another was when it is revealed why Paul has such a disdain for David. It goes beyond the post-traumatic stress disorder that he suffered from having served in Vietnam. It also has to do with the fact that David's mother died in childbirth. And so with that being the case, Paul blamed David for his wife's death and always saw him as a reminder and as the reason behind his wife having passed away. And it was a painful thing that he allowed to basically consume him and to be a barrier between his relationship with his son. And that was heartbreaking. And it was also heartbreaking that during the course of this film, Paul snaps. He's in Vietnam. He's reliving a bunch of old memories, and he has some guilt that he's carrying around where Stormin' Norman is concerned. And he pretty much snaps, and all the other characters pretty much rush him and tell him, look, this isn't the way we're going to go. And he sees this as a big betrayal. And he tells David, his son, that he's no longer his son and he doesn't want to have anything to do with him and everything. And of course, this hurt David immensely. But you get to understand where it's coming from and why he has this deranged view of things, not just because of the post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's another thing. And then the third thing that touched me was the reveal of what I already knew was to be the case. I had figured this out early on, that Paul was responsible for Norman's death. Now, I knew that this was the case. My feeling, my gut early on said, he's carrying too much. Everybody else seems to be, dealing with everything, but he's the one that's having the dreams of Norman and having this omen come to him. My thoughts were he was responsible for his death in some way, and he was. Now, because there was the gold that they were going after, greed does things to people, and it can turn an otherwise stand-up person into somebody who lets the greed turn them into an evil person, or someone who will stop at nothing to achieve their goals based upon their greed. And so that being the case, since I had come to the conclusion that Paul had been responsible for Norman's death in Vietnam, I thought he may have killed him for the gold, his share of the gold. There would be one less person they had to split it with when they went back to retrieve it. Come to find out that it was an accident. There was a Viet Cong woman who was coming to the plane or the helicopter that they were defending as their base. And she was going to sneak in and kill Norman, and Paul turned around, and when he turned around, he fired, but he ended up accidentally killing Norman and the woman. And the guilt of that, he did it. He knew he did it on an accident, but he did it nonetheless. And he covered it up. He never told the other guys what happened. He just made it out like the enemy had killed Norman and that he wasn't responsible, even though it was an accident. So he's carried around this guilt for almost 50 years. And all of these things, the horrors of war, being in gunfights and killing other people and trying to survive, not getting killed yourself, all of those horrors are compounded by the knowledge that he had killed their friend, even though it was an accident. And then when he returns home, his wife is pregnant and ends up dying in childbirth. I can understand why he went nuts. It's understandable. It's tragic, but it's understandable. So I would say those are the three most, I guess, highly valued points within the film that maybe stood out for me. And one bonus would be at the end when Otis is reunited with his daughter and it seems as though they're going to form a relationship. I thought that was cool as well. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go piggyback on a couple things you talked about. The way Paul struggles to save his son, all of the facade, all of the pride was stripped away at that point. All he could think about was that he needed to get his son back. Those were really compelling moments in the film for me. What I liked about the journey of Paul, he has the most secrets, he has the most pride, and pride can destroy a man if you are unwilling to face your demons and unwilling to recognize your flaws. And I think that Paul is sort of the character that he's the most prideful. He's committed the most mistakes, and he's the one that's least willing to admit to his past. He's the one willing to reconcile with his son for something that the son really had nothing to do with. The way this movie reveals, it's sitting on several secrets, and it reveals everything in a certain order. You spend a good deal of time wondering what the heck is up with Paul. Why is he acting so weird? And you think you have some theories. You kind of attribute it to standard post-traumatic stress disorder, and that explains a lot of it. But then when you find out some of the more specifics, you find yourself going, okay, that makes sense, but I wish that he hadn't made some of the choices he made. He ends up ultimately breaking away from the other four. He kind of becomes, by the end of the movie, he's the villain of the piece. He becomes the one that's the greatest detriment to the group. He's the one that he separates himself from them, but that ends up actually working out in their favor because he was so out of control and such a detriment that they needed him to separate in order for them to have any chance at success. And it's this great tragedy. Full credit to the actor for the way he walks this fine line of sympathy and yet tragedy, being becoming a detriment to the cause, but you totally understand why it happened. And that's why, as you said earlier, I hope that the Academy does recognize this performance. The movie's coming much sooner than most of these Academy films, but I hope he gets the recognition for the complexity of what was being done here. You talked about Norman and the way that we find out that Paul was responsible for his death. I love that. One of my favorite moments is when Norman talks to him and says, "I forgive you." And, Paul gets that message, whether it's in his head or whether Norman has actually visited him from beyond the grave. It's all left kind of vague on purpose. You don't know if Paul is just dealing with his demons within himself or if he's actually having a supernatural experience. And so there's a certain redemption going on here, and you're not entirely sure what you're looking at. Let's see. One of my favorite moments And unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to figure out which character this was. One of them was financially very well off when they come back to Vietnam, and I'm not 100% sure which one of the.
Eddie.
That was Eddie. Okay, thank you. There's a moment in the movie where he's paying for everyone's hotel, he's paying for everyone's meal, and you kind of get the idea he's been doing this for a long time because he's independently wealthy and he's very well off. And then there comes a revelation at a certain point that he's lost everything, and he's actually has no money. He doesn't have a pot to piss in, to coin a phrase. And the look on everyone's face when this revelation comes out is so much how I think so many people would respond to that, because so many of us want to have financial independence, and so many of us can't understand how someone can be in that position and then just lose it all through your own foolishness. There's a moment where he finally tells everybody, hey guys, I don't have any money. And everyone's just looking at him like, are you crazy? What? How did you do that? How could you possibly let that happen? That was one of my favorite bits. And like you talked about, they're all here not completely altruistic purposes. They're all looking for a big payday, but the fact that he's so desperate to get back the financial wealth that he had at one time and lost, I thought was an interesting twist.
Absolutely. And the fact that he is talking about this and he's moving backwards, and then he ends up stepping on a landmine and dies horrifically. Yes. It's not lost on the theme of things that it kind of brings them, it pulls heads out of asses, except for Paul, who his head is wedged even further up his ass with regards to things. But it also puts into perspective some things that I think Spike Lee was making a point of. I don't know if you want to say it was subtle, but it was definitely acknowledged and by myself. I don't know if you picked up on this, RJ. So just to give you a little bit of background with regards to Paul was a MAGA person. He had the hat, Make America Great Again. He was a supporter of Donald Trump. And this was prominently displayed from the very beginning, as he had the MAGA hat on. And he was talking, stuff about, yeah, I voted for him and this, that, and the other. Well, as RJ had mentioned, he's the one that had the most problems, and he's the one that wigged out. He's the one that became the villain. And I think that was
not by accident.
It was a subtle, to some extent, parallel, but I think that most people can read between the lines, as it were, with that. Just an interesting little tidbit of information with regards to that particular character. But I want to talk about one more thing with regards to Paul's character, is his redemption arc and how that was handled. So he wigs out, he's separated from the group, he has his share of the gold, he's ended up falling down a slope as he's pursued by people who had double crossed them in wanting to have the gold for themselves. So he falls down the slope. The gold is in a knapsack, which gets caught in a high tree branch, and he cannot retrieve it. So his thoughts are, wow, Norm got his wish. He did not want this gold to be used for selfish purposes. The idea when they found it back in 1973 was to eventually get it back to the United States and use it to help the community. And that was the goal. But of course, things change, people change, so forth and so on. So this begins Paul's redemption arc when he ends up getting captured by the enemies who are trying to take the gold, he basically stalls them, knowing that they are going to eventually kill him, but he stalls them because I think inside he's thinking, well, if I can give the others more time to escape, then that's a good thing, and hopefully they'll get away. And he keeps kind of talking out of his head and being sarcastic and stuff, and eventually the henchman for the person who betrays them kills Paul in the middle of the jungle in Vietnam. So it's almost crazy to think he went over there as a young man, fought, escaped, cheated death, and went home, had a life, only to return to be killed in the land that he had escaped from during the war, which was like, wow. That is something in and of itself. But then to see the character be redeemed at the end, because he had written a letter to his son and he'd given it to Otis, who was his son's godfather, worth mentioning. And he wanted Otis to give the letter to David, his son, upon his death. And so that's what happened. And he explained to David all the things that were going on, let him know that despite how crazy he acted and what he put him through, that he really did love him, and that, he really wishes things could have been different. And that was another touching moment when David is reading this letter from his father, and it kind of brings Paul full circle. It's kind of like his redemption arc was handled by being separated from the gold, snapping him out of his own greed, only to have him sacrifice himself, knowing he's going to die anyway, to try and help the others. And then the letter to his son, it at the end of the film, I felt satisfied that he had redeemed himself in my eyes personally. What did you think about that, RJ?
No, there's a lot. There's so much. If for some reason you did not watch this movie and you're just listening anyway, you can probably tell there's a lot to unpack here. I definitely agree. I think Paul, in a certain way, he died in Vietnam a long time ago, and this just, he had the opportunity to put things to rest in his own mind, to finally address some things that had been left unaddressed for 50 years. All this weight he was carrying around, he had an opportunity to make some things right. I think in his mind he never left Vietnam, and I think when he went back again, he had a second chance to kind of take care of a few things. Not the way he would have planned it, definitely. A lot of it was through accident, and a lot of it was in spite of his intentions, some not. But ultimately, he came to realize that he needed to do what he could to delay, the mercenaries that were trying to track down the others. He did come around and do the right thing with, no pun intended. He came around and did the right thing for his comrades. He came around and he made it right in his head with his dead comrade, his fallen comrade. And at least you felt like by the time he met his demise, he had found some peace in himself, something he hadn't had since he was a soldier back in Vietnam. And that was a very profoundly moving moment in a very profound movie. I know the more I talk about this, the more I'm thinking I may have sold it short on my rating. So,
yeah, I'm with you there. The more that we talk about it, the more I'm thinking, I would have liked to seen the de-aging, but the subject matter, is so deep. And
yeah, they took on a lot here for sure.
Right. Couple other things worth mentioning is the other blood, which would be Eddie. So Eddie's played by Norm Lewis. He also dies, but he dies heroically. It's funny that they had mentioned another soldier during, I don't even think it was Vietnam. I think it was World War II, where the black soldier, sacrificed himself for his comrades and threw himself on a landmine. And ironically, and it's not Eddie, it's Melvin. I'm sorry, Melvin, who's played by Isaiah Whitlock Jr. My apologies, I want to get this right. Who sacrifices himself. He hears them speaking about the soldier from World War II who did this, and he said, "Man, I love y'all, but there ain't no way I would do that." But he ends up doing it anyway because that's what they do. That's how tight of a bond that they had. And it was, a very heroic death. It was one that, spoke to his underlying character and the character of all of them, actually, including Paul, to a certain extent. That this film did a lot. And like RJ said, there's a whole lot to unpack here. I think we could talk for another hour about it, but I think that I want to kind of wrap this up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I agree. I feel like we probably could easily 1 hour, but the point is, you all just need to go see this. If you have Netflix, it's already there. There's no reason not to stream it and take a couple of hours and check it out. You're talking about one of the great filmmakers of our time who has put up a movie basically for free on Netflix because that's the time we're living in. And it wasn't made to be direct to video. This was intended for the movie theater. So you're going to get a total Class A artistic film for the price of your Netflix subscription. So you're just not going to do any better than this.
Absolutely. And so it's worth mentioning in the, I guess, top echelon of films based on the Vietnam War. 3 of my favorites are Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, and Apocalypse Now. This is definitely now in my top 5 for sure. Absolutely. Of films that deal with the Vietnam War. Another one that I enjoyed, which didn't really deal with a lot of the combat aspects of it, was Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. This film, if, like RJ said, if you've got Netflix, go ahead and watch it. It's worth it. Please let us know what you think about the film in the comments. We would love to hear your take on it. What about the film did you like? What are there things that you did not like? We'd like to hear from you. And please subscribe to our channel so you can get all of our shows when they air and keep up with everything. And then please like the video if you are liking our show or a particular show. Give us a thumbs up. We greatly appreciate that. That helps us out in various ways. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. You are a tremendous reason why we do what we do. Please check us out on Twitter and check us out on Facebook. If you want to know more about what's going on with me, you can check out my website at johnfallenauthor.com. And where can they find you, RJ?
Hey, I am at rjsullivanfiction.com. And to double back on where I feel this movie ranks among other Vietnam War films, some of my favorites are Born on the 4th of July, which I think this is, it's closest to this, but it's really not. What I really liked about this is it is its own thing. I've never seen anything where we deal with Vietnam and how people are thinking it here in the 21st century. And also, it really surprises me we've not seen more films where soldiers go back to a modern Vietnam and watching. That's been you hear stories about that happening in real life, but this is the first film that I can think of where we've actually tackled this subject head on and what it. So, Spike Lee is a latecomer to this topic, but I feel like, now that he has decided that we're going to do one of these, he made it uniquely his, and he tackled a topic that has been but also in a way that's never quite been done before. So, in some ways, that's kind of stating the obvious, but I feel like if we're going to talk about other Vietnam War films, I want to lead with this is different from those. So, Born on the 4th of July, Platoon I enjoyed, although I can't bring myself to rewatch that one very often. One of my favorites I can recall was Hamburger Hill, which focused on the brutality of and the futility of so many of those battles where it's, you're literally taking that same hill over again, and what's the point of all that? Apocalypse Now, I know I have seen. I have to say it's been probably a couple of decades. I remember enjoying it at the time, but I don't remember it well enough to speak about how high up that would rank. Born on the 4th of July is one I've seen the most and probably one I enjoy the most because of the way the narrative comes around to someone who went from being extremely patriotic to realizing what their government was doing to the soldiers and kind of using them and then trying to ignore them when they've come back again. And I think that movie is as topical now as it was at the time that was going on and at the time that movie was coming out. So those would be the films I would call out as among my favorites. So anyway, you can learn all about me at rjsullivanfiction.com.
Absolutely. One other film, Vietnam era film that I forgot to mention that I want to at least mention is Full Metal Jacket. That was another one that I really enjoyed. So when you're looking at top 5, then you've got it with that one. So Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Apocalypse Now, Born on the 4th of July, and The Five Bloods. Those are my top 5 Vietnam era films. And if you haven't seen those other films we mentioned, please go ahead and check them out as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe and check us out on Twitter at Two Towers Show. We thank you for tuning in, and until next time, bye.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by OG Nerds, a new social media community dedicated to nerds of a certain age, 40 and over, although all are welcome. Members are encouraged to share articles and links on their favorite nerdy topics such as animation, anime, art, books, writing, comics, manga, movies, music, sports, tech, science, TV, video games, RPGs, and more. Be sure to visit them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Two Towers Talk Show is sponsored in part by Showtime Cinema in Mooresville, Indiana. Their friendly staff is always willing to go the extra mile to make your movie-going experience an enjoyable and memorable one. Enjoy the comfort of their new cushioned seating in their spacious auditoriums, and while you're there, be sure to stop by the concession stand and purchase some popcorn where real butter topping is an option. They're located at 300 South Bridge Street in Mooresville, Indiana. We hope to see you at the movies.